Welcome to Empowered to Grow, the podcast. I am your host, Hanan El-Basha. Welcome everyone to a new episode of Empowered to Grow in Business podcast. As always, I'm excited to see you. This is your host, Hanan El-Basha. And yes, today is episode, I was just reminded by Vera, my guest today. Today's episode 194. So it's always exciting to have every guest because I know that every guest has a lot of value and a lot of experience to bring to the table. And today I am more than excited to bring you one of the most influential, connected, all over the place in a very good way, Vera Futorjanski. Vera, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no, thank you for such a wonderful intro. It's a pleasure to be here. It's good to see you again.
You're one of the inspiring people that I look at the ecosystem, not just in Qatar, but globally. And it's always like, oh my God, and Vera is part of Founder Institute Network as well. So it was always a great connection. But I know that your work takes you to a lot of places and you work on a lot of impact projects. And this is why I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So thank you for being here. Let's start first by kind of what you do in your story. So can you share with our audiences, who is Vera?
Oh, who is Vera? That's such a deep question. Okay. How far back do we go? We only have half an hour.
How far you want to go? It's yours. It's your story.
Well, tell. Many people don't know that, but I was born close to the Middle East, actually Central Asia, in a country called Kazakhstan. Yes. Which back then was the Soviet Union. So that's why I feel so at home in the Middle East. As you know, I spent the last 10 years living in Dubai, and people ask me, like, what keeps you there? And one of the reasons was really this hospitality, the people. I just feel so much more at home there, I must say, than in many Western countries. Just, because of this sitting together, drinking tea. I grew up in a country where we drink tea all the time. There are those places called Chai Hana where you just stop and have tea. And I love this about the UAE, and other places in the GCC and Middle East. So I fast forward, after having been born there, we immigrated to Germany. 12 years later, I grew up in Germany, went to high school in the US, and then let me fast forward a little bit more. Started political science in London, went into political science first, worked in the EU for 3 years, and then got this tech bug. I was back in 2013, and as you probably know, Rocket Internet was building really the ecosystem in Berlin and in many places in emerging markets around the world. So I saw a tweet back then that they were looking for somebody, and I replied on Twitter and they hired me. It was really, easy back then. And I joined Rocket Internet, moved to Berlin. A year later, I moved to Dubai to help launch a startup, and then stayed there, pitched my idea of a startup, and then, was supposed to stay for 4 months. And, 10 years later, here we go. Dubai really keeps you, or the Middle East in general. Yeah. So built a startup. Then it was the year when Sheikh Mohammed proclaimed the year of innovation, 2015. And I got headhunted from Rocket by the Dubai government, by the Dubai Future Foundation, which was just forming back then. It was a new entity being formed within the Dubai government. And I joined as part of the founding team to build Dubai Future Accelerators, which probably all your listeners in the Middle East know about. It was really the kind of the place that really kick-started off the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Dubai, I would say. We built this accelerator with government entities and the most innovative companies from all over the world, including local companies, and hosted talks, really brought community together as well. Wonderful experience. And then from that, I joined Dubai Future Foundation, was part of many other innovation initiatives. Super interesting time. Really loved working for Dubai government because it was just, big dreams. What can you do? What's innovative? Here's the budget. Really amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then after that, joined 500 Global. Back then it was called 500 Startups, to manage the Middle East operations, and really with a focus on opening the Saudi Arabia market. So as part of a team that launched the first international accelerator there, back then with MISC, Mohammed bin Salman's foundation, brought investor education. We really were part of building the entrepreneurial ecosystem there. So really, if I look back on those past 10 years, I think what I've done the most, I've been involved in building entrepreneurial innovation ecosystems in emerging markets, which has been really a dream. I was just there at the right time, at the right place, and it has been phenomenal, really. I'm very grateful. So yeah, here we are.
I love that. I love that. And this is what I meant by being everywhere, because I know that, looking at your record, it's been very interesting how innovation and ecosystem building are so connected. And I think that's what I wanted to address with you today. Let's first start with the basics, because like a lot of people have different definitions of innovation. And I would love to know from your perspective, how do you see innovation and how did it play into the ecosystems that you were part of?
Mm. Well, I think why it worked out so well for Dubai, and I really, even in Germany, as you know, I shared with you, I was just on a trip with the German finance minister in the Gulf last week. We went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE.
Yeah.
And, so many people on the trip have never been to the region before, and they were amazed by the evolution, by things that are happening, by the speed, the fast pace. And
Yes.
one of the things I always share with people is it's this, bringing in different stakeholders. We have a lot of public-private partnerships. The Dubai Future Accelerators, why it was such a success is because we brought in different stakeholders together. So I really strongly believe that innovation, and those innovative ecosystems are then at their best if we bring diversity together. The
I
different
love that.
stakeholders, the government, entrepreneurs, investors, but also academia. You just have to bring different minds together, because if you bring people from the same bubble, you will have results from the same bubble. So you really need to bring different views on something, and that creates innovation.
I love that, because I wrote about that once, saying that,
Yeah,
what an ecosystem and how an ecosystem kind of becomes distinct is when you involve the different parties. As you said, the public, the
exactly.
private, the academia in it, the people who are you're creating this for, who are the entrepreneurs themselves,
Yeah,
understanding where they're at and stuff. But let's talk about what happens when you bring
exactly.
everyone to the table, and the delegation of what happens next, because I see that's a bottleneck in a number of initiatives I've been involved in, or even just observing on the outside. They all come up with great ideas, but who gets to execute? Who gets to put it on ground? And where are, from your perspective and your experience, I mean, building up so many, where do you see the issues are that could be, or the barriers that could be taken away?
Mm. Well, now that I'm back in Germany, I see so many barriers, right? I
Okay.
mean, I think it's just, first of all, there are no public-private partnerships happening, or just very, very few, which I think is a
Okay.
big issue. It's such a phenomenal work in the Middle East, especially in the GCC, of bringing these parties together, of understanding, of
Yeah.
hearing each voice, of really giving people the opportunity to speak and, be part of the table. I think that's great. The barrier often happens if you don't involve certain communities who you're actually building for, or who you want to be part of the process. That's a big
Hmm.
barrier. A barrier can also be, like in Germany, for example, that the government just doesn't have money for that, or the money is being allocated elsewhere. Where I think the GCC really understands this, this creating the future you want, type of attitude. To really create the future you want means also to put money in the places where you want your future to be, right? So it's not just creating more policies like it's being done in Germany, but actually creating those initiatives that create a better life for its citizens and its people. I think that happens a lot, and obviously it's very attractive. You see so many Western startups going to the GCC as well, just because the incentives are there, and that's a
Yeah.
big barrier I find in Europe right now as well. We just maybe make it very difficult for some entrepreneurs, to set up a company, and to run your company as an entrepreneur in Germany is much more difficult. I've experienced that myself now. I have a company in Germany and in the UAE, and I must say running a company in the UAE, it's much easier. So
Wow. Okay.
I think there are so many barriers on the policy side, on the execution side, on the just, when you deal with people who have not been entrepreneurs themselves. And that's actually, I want to remark that that's a big part of success in the UAE, and in other surrounding countries in Saudi. You have so many people who sit in government positions and make decisions, who are entrepreneurs on the side as well. They have their
Yeah.
own startups, or they're involved in venture capital firms, or they somehow do more things than just being a government official, which is already a lot on its own. You have a lot on the plate.
Yeah.
But every time I go, and especially because just last week in Abu Dhabi, we went to see the Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce, and there was like who's who of Abu Dhabi in front of me. And I know that all of them have 3 jobs at least. I don't know how they manage. I asked them, like, how do you manage? And they're like, well, somehow we manage. And just this entrepreneurial attitude, the mindset, and that if you understand that and you have an entrepreneur in front of you, you understand her or his issues much more than, let's say, a government official who's never built anything. So I think that's what I would say is a big barrier of not having been in the shoes of the other person, and that happens in a lot of older countries like Germany, and I wish we could change that.
I love that you brought that up, especially the entrepreneurial mindset, because I keep talking about it a lot, having transformed myself from corporate life to setting up businesses, being first it was like a business owner, now I'm on the tech side, so I'm a tech founder and stuff, and I always say there is so much value in the experience that you can bring from your corporate seat. But those that have done both, those that have rolled up their sleeves and got down and dirty trying to build something, that value is kind of really priceless, because as you said,
is priceless.
It supports the policy making. It supports you stand in their shoes and you understand what they're going through.
100%. Yeah.
I want to take you back to the funding part, because I know, mentoring any startup, it's always about, I'm looking for investors. I'm like, okay, just, let's get the basics first. Let's get the foundation first. But as you said, funding is not just for the entrepreneurs themselves trying to set up. There's funding there's the government funding that supports the ecosystem in the building. Then there's the private part, which then comes in from the angel investors, from the venture capitalists, from we're seeing a lot more family offices and businesses trying to, support that. How do you see this mix being involved in the funding and in the investment world as well? Where do you see it kind of the success formula for this? How does it all come together in a way that supports the building of both the ecosystem and the on-ground building of businesses themselves?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like you said, I'm also really happy to see family offices coming into it much more. The issue with family offices was previously that we used to allocate into the assets that were known, right? The real estate or construction, where you've made, the previous generation made the money. So the new generation wanted to go much more to the venture capital space, which is a much more, let's say, risky space, right, than a real estate. So to actually convince, your family for the next gen has not been so easy. I've had lots of conversation with with a lot of next gen who were saying it's hard for them to convince to invest into startups, because as we know, 9 out of 10 startups fail. So it is a risky business. However, with the right support of building the right ecosystems, that's how we can support, the entrepreneurs from, not failing, but actually succeeding. And it's not just about funding. We see Silicon Valley is raising, so much money and there's so much funding, but then suddenly you see a company, from China with way less funding coming up and actually managing it as well. I saw Fadi Gandur's post the other day on LinkedIn where he celebrated that. He was like, yeah, this is a new era. It actually talks about you don't need all that money in order to succeed. Look at DeepSeek, they managed to succeed with way less money than that. So I think it's not just about funding, it's about the support system. It's about having the right people next to you who can advise you in different situations. It's about having the partners where you can actually leverage, where you can test your technology. Why do Dubai Future Accelerators was such a success? Because we brought companies with the potential partners together, right? Let's take a flying taxi example. The Road and Transportation Authority, RTA, wanted to have flying taxis. So we brought VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing startup into our accelerator and paired them with RTA. So they were able, we created the setup for them, the foundation of you can test your technology right here. This is a partner who would be willing to test your technology. And that a lot of startups need, who are actually building products like, VTOLs or, other products that need to be tested in certain environments, be it in government entities, be it, like smart cities. Look, we're doing a lot of things in smart city. Just yesterday, I had a call with somebody from Korea. She actually lives in a smart city where even the trash on the street is being pulled from like underneath the ground for companies to be able to test the technologies, they need the partners to be able to do so. That's governments, it's corporates, it's large organizations that would test a company. So I think those kind of partnerships are essential for success for startups.
I love that. And speaking of the kind of the cross merger of industry and private and public and creating the space, my last corporate job was with Qatari DR. So here it's a real estate investment arm of the government, of the Qatari government. And I know we were working on Qatar Railways, the concept, and bringing in, we first brought in Deutsche Bahn to, kind of bring in that knowledge base to be able to set up this concept. So speaking of that, bridging ecosystems, the cross-global, now we're, the global world that we live in, we can't just depend on our expertise. It's kind of bringing it in. Talk about that from your experience and natural of how do we do that in a way that works for everyone? It's not just about I pay you, you come, do this for me. It's this transfer of knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, super important. I think those global collaboration is what we need going forward. We can't just live into our small place and think, well, who cares what's going on out there? I'm just here in my little village in whatever country. It doesn't work like that anymore. The world is global, right? We are much more interconnected nowadays. And it's so important to share knowledge, but I think it has to go both ways. We used to think we need to have this knowledge exchange. I don't know, Deutsche Bahn coming to Qatar. I think we can now learn much more from emerging markets in Germany. And that's what I'm trying to tell the Germans a lot as well. Let's listen to the global south. Let's listen to emerging markets because they are much more, further ahead in the whole digitalization space. In Africa with M-Pesa, you can pay for your tomatoes on the market with your phone. In Germany, in many places, it's still cash only. So what I really want is for people to change their mindset, that it's not just, Deutsche Bahn is still good, but it's not what it used to be. I think, the train system, I don't know, does Qatar have a train? I haven't seen it. But
not yet. We have the metro, but the whole vision was to have Qatar connected with the countries in the GCC.
But in fact, I saw Saudis launching a train in the desert, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So I think, what's really important for this knowledge exchange is not to have, let's say, a Western country giving their knowledge, is to have a two-way street. Let's exchange knowledge as equal. And I think that is super important, that we need to make sure that the Western world becomes a little bit more humble and takes a step back and doesn't think anymore, hey, we're the ones who know everything. No, it's look at the other countries who are so much more advanced. When I was with Rocket Internet, we saw how Africa leapfrogged, the whole computers, they went from normal telephones to mobiles pretty much. They skipped the whole laptop thing. That's why they are so much more advanced in the whole digital payment thing than many Germans are. Just because they leapfrog, they understand it. You have so many digital natives. You have many more digital natives I find in emerging markets than in established markets. So yeah, knowledge exchange is important, but I think it's really important to point out that it's an equal exchange. It's a two-way street, and it's not going from somebody who knows better to another, but it's actually being open-minded, listen to emerging markets with a much more open-mindedness, with much more of this feeling of we are equals in this. So yeah, so that's my appeal to many Western countries, to be more humble and actually listen to many emerging markets who are doing it better. Let's be honest. I think many people don't want to accept it yet, but I see a lot of innovation coming from such markets.
I love that because this is the essence of startups, and why startups, and I advocate a lot for SMEs, small and medium enterprises, because of their size and because of their experimental state, they would try things. They're a lot more nimble and agile.
Exactly.
They work on really on-ground solutions to the pain points of their communities, their societies, and the world at large, which a lot of the larger corporations are unable to do because of how, I don't want to say stagnant, but how the processes they have to go through is a lot more difficult. And I see the resemblance when you're talking about kind of Germany versus UAE.
Yeah.
UAE is in this experimental startup attitude.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus, Germany is already set in its way.
It's being run like a startup. Having said that, Hanan, I'd like to point out that, for example, so many SMEs in Germany, we call them Mittelschicht, right? So it's those family-owned businesses. they
Yes.
are really experts in certain things. They can, they've been maybe for the last 60 years have been doing little bolts that are needed for certain, parts of a car.
I
So
know,
they're really
or
experts.
Airbus or Boeing. There are a lot of
Exactly.
those that just do that. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but yeah, well, exactly. Well, but in Germany, you have so many of those middle schicht businesses, and some of them were with us on the trip yesterday to the Gulf as well, that are either really, great in solar panels or in green hydrogen, or, they're just so good in one thing because Germans, and I must give them that, they are all about precision, right? It's all
True.
about it's
True.
all about let's get this technology, let's have this precision, they have the patience, they have
Yeah.
this
And
knowledge,
that's a
this
beautiful thing. That's
engineering
brand
mindset. It's a
Germany. Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
mindset. This is
Yeah.
beautiful. I really appreciate that about Germany. It's this precision. So that's where, going back to the knowledge exchange can really happen. And it's happening. I know that there's a lot of expertise from this German technology engineering space that is going to many other markets around the world. So yeah, very
There's
important.
also a shift in something else that is quite related to what you're saying, Vera, and that is the CVC, the corporate venture capitals. And that's where corporates are starting to look at, okay, let's see what, startups are working in our field and let's invest in them, whether they, kind of acquire them completely or just
Yeah.
invest to grow them so they can serve. What are your views? What are you seeing, observations in the CVC space?
Okay, I mean, I don't want to make any enemies in the CVC space,
No,
but
no enemies,
I have my
observation.
I have my thoughts about CVC. I must say, obviously, I don't know all that happened, but most of the CVCs I spoke with, I haven't really seen huge success coming out of it. Why? It's going back to what you and I discussed previously. It's not necessarily the people who've done it themselves before.
Hmm.
They're not
Okay.
as agile as startups. I've heard from many
Yeah.
startup founders that unfortunately, partnering with a CVC has not brought them what they were hoping for. Right. So
Okay.
it's CVCs can be quite slow as well, unfortunately, in that respect, just because it's people who are, not really invested in it themselves and mostly on a salary. I mean, there are some great people in that space as well. I just had dinner with somebody from a CVC last week, and but unfortunately, they have such a dinosaur behind in their back that it's very difficult for them to move. So it's not that they don't want to move fast, but they're not the agile startup or an agile VC that can make quick decisions. They have a whole construct behind them, that holds them back. So if I were a startup, probably CVC would not be my first choice. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Okay, let me ask you then. Let's turn the question around to save the CVCs in action. What do you think is how would CVCs do their job to the best of their ability? Like what would you love to see a CVC's role be?
Mm. I mean, I think maybe if CVCs had more decision-making power and not being so tied to the corporate that they're part of. So CVC maybe just for people, corporate venture capital, just to bring everybody on
Yes.
the same page. So
Yes.
it's a corporate VC, let's say, I don't know, name a very big company, Siemens or
Yeah.
anybody, right? Deutsche Bahn, for that
Yeah,
matter, would
Boeing
set up
Boeing
a
do that. I was in London, and I think it was Boeing or Airbus. One of them, one of the airliners was there. They were being represented by saying, "Yeah, we have a CVC part," and
yeah.
I think the BBC as well, like even British Broadcasting
Ah,
Corporation.
BBC has
Yeah,
a venture capital arm. That's so
yeah.
interesting.
I was in
Wow.
Clifton Summit in London, and someone was there, and she's like, "Yeah, we don't do much." And again, this talking about we can't do that much, but we are
Well,
interested in this space. And
well,
I'm like,
Hanan, you're
"Okay."
answering your own question then. They don't do much and they can't do much. That's exactly what I was alluding to earlier. It sounds great to say
Mm.
BBC has a VC arm, which I don't know yet. I'll look into that, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Siemens or Deutsche Bahn or Boeing. It's great to say. And it was a big trend a couple of years ago when I was at 500. We also, were in touch with several CVCs from, different countries, supporting them and getting them to understand why it's important to work with startups. So, I mean, having seen this internally, having worked with some CVCs actually, and having seen that from within, I came to this conclusion that I find that they're not, most of them, let's not, generalize, but I think most of them just can't move fast because they have this big corporate behind them that slows them down.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
maybe if they were a bit more on their own, a bit more on the decision-making power, not having to run every decision by the big, giant, behind them, maybe there could be a better partner for startups. But other
So you
than
think on
that,
the
I think,
structure side, kind of an independent business unit rather than the business unit integrated within.
which is probably more difficult. You've been with a corporate, I haven't, but I
Yes,
can imagine
I
that it's quite difficult
know.
to separate a whole department. But I think,
Yes,
I mean, it's difficult. Of course, startups need funding, right? I mean, I always think it's great to bootstrap as long as you can, so you don't dilute yourself, you don't bring others on your cap table. I think that's maybe also important to say. We only have a few minutes left, and then I think much more important is to find angel investors, really strategic
yes,
partners who can be on your side, who understand your business, and who can come in with bigger tickets as well. And only after that, go to VCs who aligned with your mission. Or family offices. You brought up family
family
offices
offices
earlier. I
as
think
well.
family
Yeah.
offices now in our region, in the Middle East, it's I would target family offices, I think. But
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that, but what you said as well, I think is still a bit of an impediment when it comes to the family offices, because I also had a fireside conversation with a second generation family office founder, and he decided to create a fund away from the family office to be able to go with
yeah,
that pursuit, because they're not getting
yeah,
it. It's real estate, it's oil and
yeah,
gas, it's those
yeah,
things that, as you rightfully said, where the generations were able to
yeah,
create the legacy. Now they're like,
exactly.
this is too risky.
Yeah, it's tough for the next gen right now, and I hear that from many countries. So it's not just in the region, it's not just in Qatar or UAE. I've spoken to American next gen, European, Latin American. Everybody's going through the same. It really is tough. It's this the next gen is now taking over from the previous generation, and because everything is moving so fast, also
Yes.
they almost feel like we need to move faster, right? In this whole age of AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too. Okay, so my last question before my last question. So this is the last question in
Okay.
the conversation. You were on the role, or you played multiple roles when it comes to accelerators, incubators. That I call them the enablers of the ecosystem, of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And you're part of Founder Institute, which is again a pre-seed accelerator program out of Silicon Valley. How do you see the role of the enablers, especially when it comes to bridging the ecosystems?
I think super important. I
Mhm.
would say enablers are really necessary. Having said that, if I'm a startup founder, I feel like it's super important to look into the right accelerators for me, because there's so many accelerators and incubators. So I really would advise startup founders who are listening to this to really research properly. Where am I getting into? What is this accelerator? How much equity are they taking from me for being part of this accelerator? Founders Institute, as far as I remember, doesn't take any equity, right? I think, which
We
is,
take, like,
or
there's an equity
yeah,
warrant.
equity warrant. But
Yes.
some take up to double digit. So it's
Yes.
really important to research and see what is this accelerator, where do they operate, who are the companies that have gone through that accelerator, right? So yeah, but enablers per se are really essential. I think Dubai Future Accelerators has been a great enabler for the ecosystem in the UAE and beyond, the Middle East. So I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of such enablers. There are lots of people now working on building venture studios in the region and beyond as well. So those are also enablers that I think are great. Also because they then bring the community together. They organize
Yes.
fireside chats, talks, panels, evenings, demo days, and that attracts many different players from the ecosystem, be it from academia, government, entrepreneurs, investors. So I think such enablers are, yes, I'm a big fan of. Yeah. I do think
Great.
between you and I don't have an answer to that, but I'm thinking, okay, we've done accelerators now for a couple of decades. What's the next accelerator? What's the accelerator 2.0? What's the accelerator of the future? And that's what I'm thinking about lately a lot. And I feel like it's not just about coming to an accelerator and learning how to do sales, marketing, and all that. I think we need to teach much more for leadership skills. So it's really
I
I think this
please.
next
Yeah.
this next accelerator is a lot about leadership for the future, leadership on how do we become or create more of those leaders that can really lead, from this future with the right foresight, with being, digital natives, being, able to work with all the AI agents, but still keeping, this humanity, the creativity. So I think this is really essential going forward for us to look into.
Thank you for bringing that up because I call for that all the time. I'm like, yes, you
I mean,
can teach that as much as you want. But if you're not talking what you referred to earlier, if you're not addressing mindset, entrepreneurial mindset, if you're not addressing wellness, if you're not addressing what is unfortunately referred to as the soft
yeah,
skills, so it's on the side, the
yeah,
leadership, the resilience, the perseverance, there's no point because you can do
yeah,
everything right as per the book, as per, the instructions you get
yeah,
from how to build a business, but it still
yeah,
doesn't work out. How do you go
yeah.
back to the drawing
I mean,
table?
exactly. You can do your B2B testing and then you wonder why doesn't it work out, right? Because, maybe, yeah, like you said, you need those, soft skills. I mean, I think one of the most important things in my life is meditation, and which accelerator teaches you that, right? I mean, here behind me,
None.
you see it's actually my meditation corner with a Kuwaiti
I love
carpet
that.
I have there. Yeah, with my little singing
It's
bowl.
super important.
I think
Yeah.
it's super important. And I wish there would be more accelerators for that, almost like leadership accelerators. And this is something, in fact, I'm working on building right now. So now let's chat
Let's
offline
talk.
about
We
this.
need to talk. We need to talk about that because you know what was
And
very
whoever's
important.
listening, we do
And
partners
whoever's
in this as
listening,
well.
please,
So
yes.
yeah.
It took me 20 years, approximately 15 to 20 years of having a professional life between the corporate, between building businesses and everything else, and going through all the academia that and I share this a lot. It was after I completed my doctoral degree that I went into a health coaching certification for a year, just because for the
Mm,
first time in my life at the age of 40, I decided to prioritize my wellness and my happiness.
yeah.
And
It's
this is
it's super
why
important.
yeah, I talk about these
Yeah.
things a lot, about meditation and everything we've been talking about. And had I known this when I first started building my first business, I think the trajectory would have been
Yeah.
different. But again, not regretting it. I'm just happy that now I can see it.
Yeah, I think it comes with age, I must say as well. It doesn't when you're young and you're ambitious and you don't need much sleep, I think you go, go, go. And then at some point you're like, okay, I think, I need some sleep.
I'm
I'm getting
breaking down.
tired.
I mean,
But
last week
it's
I
super,
shared I was on the brink of burnout because I'm like, okay, now, I have to
yeah,
step back. But yeah, I just
yeah,
said at the age of
yeah,
20, I was on the Energizer bunny mode, which is like, go, go, go,
yeah,
go, go.
yeah. Yeah, but it's really important. And I think, one thing I want to mention as well, because many times, you go on Instagram and you hear those people, 5 a.m. club, I wake up at 5, I work out for 1 hour. That's great for some people. But I think
Yeah,
it's super important to find what's good for myself.
that's
Is
true.
it good for me to wake up at 5 and work out? Or maybe am I better to work out in the afternoon because that's where I have better energy? So I think
Exactly.
we need to invest some time into reflecting, into understanding what is actually good for us to really get to know ourselves. I think that's one of the first steps to really get to know ourselves in order then to be able to create, the life we want, which will also be, of benefit to others.
I love that you've said that. I think you might have answered my last question that I give all the guests, but I'm going to ask it to you again.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, Empowered to Grow is the name of the podcast. How does this phrase, empowered to grow, resonate with you personally?
I think you're right. I think I answered it by saying that we need more of this leadership academies, really, of this leadership settings where we empower people to think, to be able to really take time to reflect on what's good for them and not just do what they've seen has been good for others. I hope I'm explaining myself right. I think it's really about taking the time of understanding, of getting to know oneself, to understand what is good for me. How can I operate best? When am I my best abilities? When I at my best, energy levels? And I think that's when if we create that space where we empower those people to take that time to understand, maybe with some, support like leadership accelerators or other ways, and that will empower a lot of people to grow further.
I love that. Vera, thank you so much for
Oh,
being here today and sharing all the value that you've shared. I love the fact that you resonated a lot of what I'm calling for. So thank you for that. It's been a true pleasure.
thank you. It really has been a pleasure. And I hope I'll see you in person again soon.
Yes, yes, I hope so too. And for everyone who's been watching or listening, thank you so much for joining us. I do hope that you take everything that Vera has said today to heart. Collaboration
Mhm.
and innovation is a two-way street. It's about creating something that works for everyone, but it's also about bringing everyone around the table to be able to get the best out of it. And more importantly, and as I always advocate for, you are at the center of that universe. Make sure you take care of you. Make sure that, you are building your venture, your ecosystem, or whatever role you have, no matter how big your impact circle is, you're starting with you, taking care of you so you can take care of everyone around you. As always, I wish you love, abundance, and prosperity. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowered to Grow podcast. I'll catch you on the next episode. And until then, know that empowered you empowers others. Love, abundance, and prosperity to you all.